Okay. Seems like we should have something on the screen about now. Oh, here we go. Okay, so here's our on our schedule for today, here on the 17th. Today we're talking about the topic is recording and editing macros, and what we're going to record ourselves doing is we're going to record ourselves pulling in information from a website and then doing some processing on that data. It's really like the task that we're doing today is really powerful. Like being able to not just to be able to pull information from an external site, but to be able to automate that is really powerful. Did I tell you the story about the guy who went to work for Amazon, did his internship at Amazon? Okay, so he was talking about the content that he learned today in today's class. He got was pretty thrilled to get an internship at Amazon, and when he came back, he came to my office, and I'd be thrilled if he did this. Actually, if I wasn't retiring, it'd be great, but I'll be gone by the time you guys are back for your internships. But anyway, he stopped by my office and he said, "Hey, professional, I just want to tell you about the VBA that I used on my internship." And I was thrilled. Come in, sit down. I don't know what I was working on, but listening to him tell me what he did with VBA was going to be way more interesting. And he said, "I went to work for Amazon." That's interesting. "And you know that stuff you taught us right at the very beginning of class, how to go to a website and get information?" He said, "That's what I did on my internship." And I looked at him askance. I had reason to doubt that the story he was telling me was true, because of all the companies in the world who have to be really good at writing software that will go to other websites and like get information off those websites to do something with, if Amazon's not the best in the world at it, they're in the top 3. Like this is like a huge capacity that they have. He said, "Okay." I said, "I'm doubtful, but go ahead, continue your story, your fanciful story." And he said, "I was hired by the digital camera division." I didn't even know they had a digital camera division, but this team that, their job is to sell a lot of digital cameras online. Now, how many of you anyone here who's like a photographer experienced with kind of high-end photographic equipment? Anyone? No one? Yeah, you in the back. Okay. So I don't know if you'll know any of the answers to these questions, but as it turns out, if you were to give me the name of like a high-end camera, just whatever it is. So if you were going to buy a Canon MX400, you want to go buy that. It turns out there's going to be a pretty narrow price range at which that Canon MX400 is sold. And the reason is because Canon and all of the the camera manufacturers, they say, "Listen, if you want to be a distributor for such a fine brand as Canon, you will have to agree, after into an agreement, not to sell these cameras below a certain price that we're going to set." So there's going to be plenty of room for you to have your profit margin on there, but you are contractually obligated from not selling it below this price. And so, now, if you're like Allen's Camera, which is, I don't know if they're still around, but that's a company I used to see every once in a while. I don't know what they did, but I guess they sold cameras. And if you're trying to compete with someone else and you've got a brick and mortar store, there's all kinds of service that you can provide. We're going to help you with, learn how to use the thing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you are an online retailer, how are you going to compete with all the other online retailers when you can't lower the price? How are you going to compete in this environment when price is not an option? If you're Amazon, or if you're any online retailer, electronic retailer, service is out, right? You're never going to see your customers. They're not going to show up and you're going to hold their hand and teach them how to do it. So how are you going to compete? How are you going to get people to choose you? Go ahead. Okay, so I might be able to have a better shopping experience. And that's probably one of the things that Amazon really excels at, right? We're going to make this happen. We're going to get it to you quickly, and that's going to be great. So that's going to be one way. How else might you do it? And apparently that wasn't enough for Amazon. They wanted to be able to compete on some way more. Price is out. We've already got our fulfillment, in place. What are other options? I bet you guys, you're smart people. Don't think about what you've read about this. Think about what you might do. Go ahead.
Can I give them like a camera case or something?
Bundling. That's it. That's what they do. There's the idea. Listen, if you buy our Canon MX400 at this price, what would it run for? $1,200 bucks, $2,000? Okay. If you buy our camera, this camera for $1,800, we will throw in a case. We'll throw in a flash. we'll throw in a potload of memory cards to go with it. And this is where the competition happens in online retailers of high-end digital cameras. The price is set by the manufacturer, but now you're going to compete by saying, we're going to offer you extra things to go with it. So the company, their division, the digital camera division at Amazon had gone to their internal IT department. We need to be able to know what our competitors' bundles are. Different than the way that Amazon normally thinks about competing. This is custom just to our area. What did their IT department say? We can do that for you. It'll take us a year. It'll cost you $100,000, but we'll have the software to do what you need. What did they do? They hired an intern. What they did instead, it's going to cost us way less and we'll get it faster. What was this guy's job at Amazon? He's so thrilled to get an internship at Amazon. What was his job? Click, click, click. Same as yesterday. Click, 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 click. Oh, they're offering a flash now. Click, click, click. Same as yesterday. That was his internship. That was it. He said he started on Wednesday, and by Friday, I was ready to end it all. I don't know what he meant by that. That's what he told me. I was ready to end it all. He said, but I remembered that stuff you showed us in class. And I worked late into the night Friday night. I worked all day Saturday. I worked all day Sunday. I said, don't tell me, tell your bishop. And by Monday morning, he had built a system that would do his job for him. Like what the internal IT department said would take a year and $100,000, he did on the weekend. Now, it wasn't the same quality that the other team would have built. And, and when you're running software that you wrote yourself, if there's a problem, no problem, you kind of dig into it and see it, you make some modification to the code. And so, I mean, it wasn't the same thing. But do you think that he got noticed at Amazon for that? Yeah, like he finished his internship on the weekend. After that, was he the one clicking the button to say, run the macro today? No, someone else did that. What did they have him do? Oh, why don't you come and automate this process for us? Why don't you come and automate this process for us? At the end of the internship, do you think he got the full-time offer? Oh, yeah. And I said, are you going to take the offer? He said, no, I didn't really like working there that much. I told this story like a couple of years later, and apparently one of his friends was in the class. He ended up taking the offer. So I don't know if he's still there or not. But anyway, so this stuff is really, really powerful. And it's all based on the idea that there are so many processes that are just like repetitive that we want to be able to automate. And this just happens to be one of them. That's kind of a fun story. Okay. So let's see. So what we're going to do, we're going to start. There's this like legacy web query add-in for Mac users. We're not going to do this in class. I kind of use these notes for other presentations that I do. Like for how many of you first saw me in the Finance ProSem? Any of you here? So a few of you. So that's where we needed that link for. But here's the idea. Let's go ahead and get Excel open. We're going to start with a blank workbook today. Excel blank workbook. That's delightful. Okay, now the homework for today that's due kind of at the end of the day was just be able to make a web query. We're going to do the homework right now in class. I think the homework gives you some other requirements, like you have to name the tab something in particular, but let's just go ahead. In fact, we'll just go ahead and do that. I don't remember what it was called, but I'm going to call this web query. Web query. And you can put space on it or whatever, it doesn't really matter. So I'm going to put a web query. So the idea here is that kind of built into Excel, there is a functionality to be able to reach out to a web page and pull some data in. And then it's not just an import, it's actually a query, meaning that I could refresh it. It's like you can say, hey, this thing is like still connected. You'd say, hey, refresh the data, great. If the data is changed on the website, bring the new data in. Now, the way that you get there is you come to a data tab, and there's this thing from web. Now, don't go too far ahead of me on this because we're going to take a detour here in just a moment. So from the data tab, I'm going to come to from web, and it's going to open up the web query wizard. You plug in a URL here and you say, okay, but don't do that. Now, so like it must have been close to 7 or 8 years ago now, they introduced this version of the web query wizard. This version of the web query wizard works great, but when we record ourselves using this one, it records pretty complex code that I don't want to have to deal with today. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the older version of this, which they retired it for a good reason, which you'll see here in just a moment. but it's going to write code. The code that it records is going to be really handy for us. And the good news is that the defects are in, the problems are in the wizard itself. The code that it generates is going to work great. So even though it'll be a little bit of a hiccup to get us there, once we've got the code, we're going to be in good shape. So I'm going to cancel this one. And instead of using the current web query wizard, I'm going to look for the legacy web query wizard. I'm going to come up here, like into the search bar in top of Excel. I'm just going to type in like from web, or anyway, I'll type in legacy. I'll see all the legacy stuff. There's not that much. Here it is, from web legacy. And this is going to open up a different web query wizard. This one actually is going to have a little like web browser built into it. It's not a very good web browser. In fact, the big problem is it doesn't do well with dynamic content. In the early days of the internet, like when your browser asked for a page from a web server, it sent the page, like sent this HTML page, and all your browser did was say, show that page. Then, kind of in the later 90s, 1990s, a company that you probably haven't heard of that used to be a big deal called Netscape said, you know what, we're going to make it so that our browser not only can show the HTML, but could like run programs locally. And they made a language. You know what the language is called? It is today the most popular language in the world. You know what the language they made was called? JavaScript. Yeah, so they made this language called JavaScript, and it was for doing automations on web pages. But then pretty soon after that, it was like, you know what? The server is going to send some structure of the page and a program, and the page is really going to get rendered by the JavaScript that's running in the browser. And that's the way probably most of our web pages happen today. Maybe not most, but that's really, really common. Any complex web page, that's how it happens today. Well, this web query wizard was written before that was the style, and so it just doesn't do well with this automated content. It sends a script error. I tried to run whatever was on this page, and it just couldn't run. Do you want to keep running scripts? So far as I can tell, whether you click yes or no, it does the same thing here. I'm going to click no, but it's going to still do it for a while. And it will kind of get to this point. No. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to put in some URL that I can tell this to go to. And the one I'm going to do is also right here on our page. So it's this link for the web query wizard. It is a random website. It is called random.org. And I'm choosing it because it has two characteristics. One, it's going to have some data that changes each time we refresh it. So I'll be able to see that the query is working. And two, it doesn't have any active script on it. So it's not going to have these errors. I'll paste that in and hit enter. So it's got cookies. Yeah, whatever, that's fine. So this is now like looking at this page in this like old antiquated browser. I think this is literally Internet Explorer that's running when you use this here. It's crazy. Okay. Any questions getting here? If you're coming along with me, and if you're going to follow along with the code, you need to be following along with me now. So we searched for legacy and we clicked on web query and pasted in that URL. All right. Now, it turns out that based on the structure of the page, you might be able to say with this old one, you might be able to say, you know what, I just want to bring in a certain part of this page. Forget that. We're going to bring in the whole page. So rather than, if you already clicked on this and put a check mark there, then click on the one out here, but you don't need to click on anything. Just click import. And that will just make a web query for this whole entire page. Where am I going to put the data? I'm going to put it in A2 on my web query sheet. I've got something in mind for A1. If you already put it in A1, no problem. Just insert a line above it, but that'll be okay. And I'll say okay. And we'll pull, and here's this is like just did its best to pull the data off of that page. I'm going to scroll down to here where it had the random part of this. So here's the random strings that it generated, or random numbers it generated. And now I should be able to come to my data tab and choose refresh all, execute that, and it should make a call back out to that web server. That web server is going to give it a different set of random data, and then it's going to come in. So you can see those things change. So you can see that we've got now a web query that will make a subsequent call to the page to say what information is there now. Okay, pretty slick. And now that it's here, like there was a problems with the scripts when we were trying to use the browser. That stuff is now gone. It's just a problem with the wizard. This thing is rock solid once it gets here. Okay, that's all the homework is. Make a web query. So you should be able to do that. And I think so the grader can find your web query. It tells you specific thing to name the sheets. Now that we've got it built, Our task for today is to say we want to have a process that says, all right, I want to modify that web query to tell it to go to a different location on the server, refresh to bring in some different data, and then bring that data in. And the data we're going to work with is like financial data from yahoo.com. So let's add a new sheet. I'm going to make a new sheet here, call it, maybe we'll just call the sheet data. And here's my thought. I'm going to say I want to know the ticker, and I'm going to want to know the price earnings ratio, the PE ratio, and the earnings per share. So given some arbitrary set of stock tickers, I would like to be able to get this information and bring it in automatically. So let's put some in here. Let's go ahead and put in Microsoft, MSFT, Oracle, ORCL, Google, GOOG, Apple, AAPL, Delta Airlines, my favorite ticker of all, Southwest Airlines, LUV, feel the love. General Motors, anyway, just some ExxonMobil, just some stock tickers. Now, I've only put 9 here, but they could have 900 of them. Yeah, can you imagine yourself that your internship is to go to Microsoft or go to finance.yahoo.com and find out what this information about these tickers is? Now, yeah, I could see it happen. So here's the idea. What we'd like to do is we'd like to say, I want to pick one of these tickers, and I want to get that data for my, I want to say, hey, update my web query, tell it to get the data for Southwest Airlines, bring that data in, and then copy in the price earnings ratio and the earnings per share. So I think we're ready to record ourselves doing it. We're going to kind of do this in 2 different steps, but let's just go. You ready to start? Are we configured? Anyone saying, hey, I'm almost ready, Professor, give me just a second? Okay. So I'm going to record the macro now. So let me go ahead and scroll up here to the top of my, no, I want to be on the data sheet. Okay, I'm on the data sheet. Now, anytime I record a macro that I'm going to want to run, I think we recorded a simple macro before, and we maybe even thought about this. But before you start recording, you want to ask yourself the question, when the user runs this macro, where should their active cell be? And I always want, and that's where I want to start. Put my active cell there when I start recording. So let's think about that. When the user, and what this macro is going to do, it's going to get the information for one ticker. So where should the active cell be when the user launches this macro that gets the information for one ticker? Which cell up there should it be on? Okay, A2. Why do you like A2 instead of A1? You're on a ticker, yeah. So you're saying, but what you're saying here is that the way that the user says which ticker they want to get the information for is by making that the active cell. They'll run the macro and it'll just lay the information in right here next to the site. Perfect, like it. Now, the second thing I want to say is when this is done running, where should the active cell leave off? So the user is going to run the macro. You're going to start on one that has a ticker. Where should it leave off? If I started there on, let's say I started right on Southwest Airlines, number 7, where should it leave off? Yeah, it's getting these 2, but let's leave off here. Why do you like one down? I don't know who said it came from over here.
Just because then
it's ready to go again. It's ready for the next run. I like it. Okay, so we've thought through those 2 things. Perfect. I'm going to start here on one of these ticker symbols, and I'm going to start recording. So developer tab, in my developer tab, record macro. It's going to say, great, what do you want to call this thing? I'm going to call this stock data. Shortcut key, it's stock data. I'll do it Control S. That sounds familiar. What does Control S do? Control S now runs this macro, so that'd be a bad idea. I'll put a capital S in there, make a Control Shift S, and I will say get PE ratio and EPS. Well, I'm really bad at typing. RAT and EOS, that's fine. For ticker. Or for ticker, that's great. Okay. Now, Be careful as I go along here. Control C will copy my active cell. Oh, in fact, here's what I'm going to do. You guys can probably don't do this part with me. Just watch this part. What I'm going to do is I am going to open up my Visual Basic environment so we can kind of see this as it comes along. So here's this. I'm not sure if it's going to record me changing the size of the window. Oh, it didn't. Good. Okay, so all I've done so far is it's recording this macro selection copy. I'm going to go ahead and select the second tab, and it'll record. We can kind of see it record as it's doing. That's really handy because I can see just exactly what the code is it's writing. So it's saying, hey, and this should look familiar to us. We talked about the very first day, we talked about objects. Objects have what? Two characteristics that were really important about objects. Objects have properties and methods. And so in both of these cases, we've seen methods. So it's an action. A method is an action. We identify a particular range, whatever is selected, and then we tell it to do its copy thing, and the range knows how to copy. We then said identify a particular sheet. Here's where we identified that particular sheet, and we said do your select thing, do your select method. Okay, now here I'm going to paste. So I'm going to come here and just, I'm going to hit Control V there. Oh shoot, here and Control V, and then it pasted in that value. So I selected A1, it selected A1, and then it said we're going to select A1, and we've pasted. Now, the next thing that I want to do is I want to record myself editing this web query, because it will generate the code it takes to change the web query. That's great. I don't want to, in one approach here would be to record myself creating the web query. And I could do that, but then every time I ran the macro, what would it do? Create a new web query. I don't want that. One web query is enough. I just want to modify that web query. So I've already got the web query. Now I'm going to record myself changing it. So here's how I do it. I'll just click somewhere on where the web query is, and I will right click and choose Edit Query. Now, it said, oh, cut copy mode equals false. That's just, like when you copy something, you get like little flashing lights around the range that's selected. Things behave differently while you're in cut copy mode. It says, listen, you're going to come edit this web query. We're done with cut copy mode. It's a little weird that it records that, but it does. Now, you may remember when we first started recording macros on like our first day of class, I told you that everything you do is getting recorded by Excel. That's not entirely true. Anytime we get to a dialog box like this, the macro recorder says, oh, a dialog box. I can tell you need a little personal time. I will avert my eyes. And it doesn't actually pay attention to what happens in the dialog box. But when you're done and you click OK, or in this case, import, it looks at how the dialog box is configured and it says, that's what we have. So what I'd like to do is, I could actually tell it to go to finance.yahoo.com here, and it would record, but it wouldn't record anything about Southwest Airlines specifically. It would just record, oh, that's the one you're going to. And there'd be all kinds of active content. I'd have to cancel a bunch of times. And so I'm just going to say import here. So what I'm really trying to do here is just generate the code that will let me modify the web query. And so I haven't changed anything, but I'll say import. And here it's brought in a block of code that says, oh, this is the way that that's configured. We'll look at this here in just a bit. In fact, maybe we'll look at it right now. Let's go ahead and stop recording at this point. So I'm going to stop recording, and let's just look at what we've got here. Okay, so we've seen all these things. We're copying our active cell. We're activating this other sheet. We're activating a cell, pasting it in, going to a range that's in the part of the web query, so that when we can actually modify that web query. And then here's the block that it recorded for the web query. Now, this is something we haven't seen yet, this with and with structure. You'll remember that Visual Basic for Applications is an object-based language. One of the things, you're working with objects all the time. In fact, the language itself is really, really small. Most of the functionality you're invoking methods of different objects. And it's so common that you might say, I've got one object that I got to do a bunch of stuff with, that they made some notation just for that. It's the with and with notation. So in the with, you're going to say with, and then you're going to identify something after it. And then that's the beginning of the block, and the end with says, all right, I'm done kind of working with that thing. And then inside this block, any expression that starts with the dot, it's doing this, it's saying, oh, you know what, just, I don't want to type it again, but just that connection is actually a property of this object. Like it will just put that object in front of anything that starts with a dot. So it's kind of nice because it makes the code narrower to see. It's just kind of early for us to have to bite this off, but the recorder does it, and so we have to deal with it. So here's the first one. It's saying we're going to change a property. And if you look at this, it's saying, oh, there's a query table that's behind the selection object. So whatever range we had selected, A2, it's going to say, oh, there's a query table behind that range. Yep, we're going to modify the query table. That's the thing we're doing, the query table from that range. And here's the important one, we're changing the connection. So right now, the same query object is used for all kinds of different queries, database queries, web queries. Those are the only two kind of queries I know. There might be other kinds, but this one, how do we know this is a web query? Look at this connection property. How do we know it's a web query? It starts with URL. Like that URL semicolon is saying, you're going to go talk with a web browser here, a web server here. Oh, by the way, if you have a line that's longer than you want to have on one, you can break a statement onto 2 lines by putting space underscore at the end. But it's a little more complex as well. And I've got plenty of room, so I'm going to bring it up. I'm just going to bring this up so it's a little simpler. So this code is saying, hey, this is the way this web query is configured right now. Well, I don't want it to be that URL. What URL do I want? I want this one from over here from our page. In fact, if I was to go to that URL, whoops, it's the next one down. I could paste that one up here. And that should show me the kind of the current information. Here's the price earnings ratio and the earnings per share. That's the 2 pieces of information that I'm after. And if I wasn't on Apple, I wanted Southwest Airlines. It's just a ticker symbol. It's different here, LUV. And that should bring me Southwest Airlines and same information here. So what I'm going to do is in my code, I'm going to say, no, don't go to random.org. Instead, go to finance.yahoo.com. So https://finance.yahoo.com. Okay, this next line here is a little bit unfortunate. Around the year 2013, the macro recorder started recording that line when you modified this web query. It didn't used to be there. And with that line in place, this code will fail. I don't know what they were trying to do with it, but it's just wrong. And kind of a little unfortunate. We're trying to do kind of a simple example here, but we have to delete that. So let's delete that. The truth is, we can delete all the rest of this because the only thing we want to change is the connection. But I'm going to leave it in here just because it doesn't really matter that it's there. We do need this last one because all of these are properties. We're changing the way that web query is configured. And what's this last one doing with the web query? Just look at it. What is it doing? It's refreshing it. That's the one that's telling it, make the call back to the server and pull the data in again. We've changed the server it's looking at. So the only 2 lines we need are those 2. We could delete them or we could leave them in place, but we had to get rid of that one command equals 0. That's unfortunate. Okay, so we've made just that modification. So we've changed the URL and we've done this. I'd like to run this query again. So I want to run this macro. So let me come back to my code. Now, where do I start? On the data sheet, pick a ticker symbol. I'll pick Google. And how do I launch it? Control-Shift-S. And what that shouldn't do that. Oh, I must have pasted that where I didn't mean to it. What should that say? Select. So I'm going to hit the stop button here to stop that code. I'm not sure how I got LUV there. I must have pasted it while I was, oh yeah, that must have been active while I did the paste. Let me try that again. Let me stop this code, stop. Oh, and I'm on Google, Control-Shift-S. There we go. So it's updating that web query, and it should now be showing me the finance.yahoo data because I changed the page that it's looking for. Yeah, this is now Southwest Airlines. I was on Google, but I haven't done anything to tell it that URL to be dynamic. It's a fixed URL that says the ticker for Southwest Airlines. I should be able to come down here and see, oh yeah, here it is. PE ratio and EPS. And that's what I'm after. So the next step I'd like to do is I'd like to make this dynamic. So instead of O is bringing in the data for Southwest Airlines, I'd like it to bring in whichever one that I just pasted. Now, this then is what's referred to as a string literal. In VBA, like all these symbols here, all these words that start with letters, the VBA interpreter is trying to figure out. I mean, I type, I put selection.copy here. Like the interpreter looks at that line, it has to say, a lot of work here. I got to figure this thing out. Selection. Oh, I know what that is. It refers to the active, like whatever is currently selected. If it's a range, it'll be a range object. If it's a chart, it'll be a chart object, and so forth. And then copy. I mean, at this moment, it goes, oh, it's a range that's selected. So I'm trying to execute the copy method of this range. And it goes, yeah, I get that. I understand it. I'll do it. It gets to the next one, sheets. Oh, yeah, I know what that is. It's the collection of all the worksheets. And here's another string literal. It says, oh, here's these characters here. That's not something like this. It's not an object or a method. It's just a collection of characters that's used to identify which sheet I'm talking about. So it doesn't try to figure out what web query means. It just goes, oh, WEBQUERY. It's just those characters. It doesn't try to understand it. And it gives that to that method, and the select method then knows what to do with that value. Same thing here. It doesn't try to understand A1. It's just saying give A1 to the range so it knows what to do with that. So the same thing here is it's saying, listen, VBA, you're not trying to understand. Don't try to understand this. Like, could some computer program understand that? What's the name of the computer program that understands what I have highlighted right now? That is called a browser. Yeah, that means something to a browser. It does not mean anything to VBA. It's not something it knows how to deal with. But the good news is it doesn't need to. It just has to give that value into the connection property of the query object. It knows what to do with the value. So what I need to do is I need to say, you know what, this is always, I mean, where's the computer looking every single time? Regardless of what I pasted into A1, what's the computer looking for? It's looking for love. It's kind of sad, isn't it? Little thing. I'm going to delete the love. Sorry, love is gone. And instead now, I'm just going to, so here's a string literal. And what I'd like to do is I would like to concatenate on another string. We'll do this in steps. So kind of the first step here, I use the same symbol I use inside of a cell to concatenate, just the ampersand. And now I'll make another string literal with a different ticker, goog. Right? You can see that would do the same thing. It's just going to say whatever the string was here and concatenate it, glue it onto whatever is here. Right? So that would make it look like, be the same as if it were in here, right? But I don't want this to be a fixed value. I want to get this from somewhere. Where do I want to get it? Yeah, A1 is where I pasted it. How do I refer to range A1? Good news. It's right up there. I don't even have to think about it. I can just copy it. So instead of hard coding that ticker symbol, I'm going to go tell it, get whatever ticker symbol is in A1. Now, this is a whole object. I want a particular property of that object. If you were going to guess what the property I'm looking for is called, what would you guess? Value. Yep. Truth is, if you asked for the formula, it would do it too, because when you have just a value in a cell, it's also the formula. Okay, that's it for now. I'm going to run it again, but now what I'm expecting to do is to actually bring in the data for the right ticker. So I'm going to come back to my data sheet. I'm going to do Delta Airlines, Control-Shift-S. Hopefully, we'll bring in the data for Delta Airlines. Can I see anything that says Delta Airlines here? I must have missed it. Line 53. Ah, there it is, Delta Airlines. Poor old eyes, I should have zoomed in. There we go. Okay, so it's brought in the information, and we should be able to come down here and see, yeah, here's earnings per share and price earnings ratio. Now, as we look at this, I'm on line 104. Anyone on, is the PE ratio on something besides line 104 for anyone? Raise your hand if you've got line 104. Raise your hand if you've got some different line. Oh, what do you got? 103, so it's pretty close. What do you got here in the front? 103. The problem here is that this web sheet or this web page like changes depending on what advertisements might be shown here. And so the structure of the page changes. And so when we bring it in, we're not sure that it's going to go in exactly the right same cell every time. Ooh. So when we start to do our next process here, which is now to go and get the data, how are we going to find the right data? Any thoughts? Like what procedure could you do in Excel using your vast Excel skills that could find the cell that has the price earnings ratio in it at 5.17, even if this thing moves around a bit? What might you do? Yeah, go ahead. Yes, you're speaking like a programmer, though. I want you to speak like an Excel expert. You don't have to do it. Someone else could do it. So what she said is just actually look at every cell until you find the one that's right. We could do that. But in Excel, I don't know a way to just tell Excel to do that. Yeah. Say it again. What's a lookup? Oh, like a VLOOKUP or an XLOOKUP. Yes, that would do it. So you could say, come over here and put a formula that says do an XLOOKUP or a VLOOKUP, find that and pull the value out. That would work. Darn it, that's not the one I'm looking for. Good answer. We could make that one happen. There's a simpler one that we're going to do. Yeah. Find. Yeah, just find. Just tell Excel to find PE ratio, trailing 12 months. In fact, I may just copy that right now and get that on my clipboard because that's what I'm going to tell it to search for. And then once I've found that, I know I'm just one cell to the right is the one that I'm after. Now, it's possible that the sheet could change in such a way that it's not one cell to the right of that, or it no longer says, trailing 12 months of the PE ratio. But we're going to assume at this point in our programming careers that at least that will remain the same. That we'll be able to find the text for that, and the value we're looking is one to the right. Okay, so I've copied that. Now I'm not copying the whole cell. I just edited the cell and copied it, so I'm just got just the text, not the reference to the range. Okay, so now I think I'm ready to start recording again. So let me bring my code up so we can see it. All right, now I forgot where I left off. Where was I? Oh, I was on A2. I just want to go back and kind of pick up where I did this little detour to get it bringing the right data in. And come back to A2. Now I'm ready to start recording again. So I'm going to come to my developer tab and record macro. Now, this one, as it turns out, all I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually just take whatever gets recorded. I'm going to put it in my other macro. So I don't really care what the name is. I'm not going to assign a shortcut key. I'll say OK. Okay, so to find what I'm after, I'm going to do Control F. I'm going to paste in what I'm looking for. PE ratio, trailing 12 months. Now, there's a little bit of danger here. Because this web page might have some kind of story on it talking about how important the PE ratio is, I might find PE ratio trailing 12 months somewhere above the cell I'm looking for. So I really want to restrict this down. So I'm going to come to options and I'm going to tell it, I want you to match the case and match entire cell contents. So if for some reason that label is in some other like larger block of text, don't find that one. Match the whole cell contents and match case. And I'll say find next. Okay, don't work ahead. Stay with me on this. So it has just recorded. We can see what it has recorded. It says this method here. There's an object called cells, and it's calling the find method. And what is it looking for? PE ratio, trailing 12 months. After the active cell, that's fine. Look in the formula, it's got all this other information, and once it finds that, it's going to activate it. That's what it did. So it found it and activated it. Now, don't do it, but what would happen, what would it record if I clicked on B104 now? What would it record? Select B104. The whole point is, I don't know that it's B104. What I've got to do is I've got to tell it, hey, when you record me selecting, don't record the absolute reference to the cell I selected, record the relative reference. So from the active cell, move over one. So it's the same notion in Excel as relative references and absolute references when you're making a formula, but now when we're recording it. And here's how we can switch back and forth. So over here in my developer tab, right below the recording button, the record macro button, which now says stop recording, right below it is one that says use relative references. So I'll click on that and I'm not really thrilled with the interface, but it'll kind of look like it stays highlighted after I've clicked on it. And so now when and I can switch back and forth between using relative references and not using relative references while I'm recording. In this case, I now want relative reference. So now when I click on that cell, I'll see what it records. It says from the active cell, offset 1 row or 0 rows and 1 column. That range A1 is kind of unfortunate here, but if I had selected multiple cells from there, that A1 would be like A1 to B12. It would actually show kind of a range here. And it's not really A1. It's saying relative to whatever is referred to before it. If that were the upper left-hand corner of the worksheet, what would it be? I really wish it didn't record for us just beginners at this, but that's how it records it. And so that recorded moving 1 over to the right. Now I've just got to get that over where I need it. So I'm going to copy that, Control C, back to my data tab. Oh boy, this is for Delta Airlines. I want to go 1 to the right. So what do I need to do? Just, yeah.
Do we need to take away the relative reference?
That's the question right now. Should I leave it on or should I take it off? What do I want? When I click on B6, do I want to select B6 every time? No, I still want it should still be relative. So I'm okay leaving it relative. So now it's selected that data sheet and it says whatever the active cell was, offset 0 rows and 1 column. Great. I've got one of what I needed. Oh, and paste. I'll press enter to paste. Or press Control V, either one will do it. We can see that it pastes. I'm going to go back to my web query sheet. Now, I could search again for EPS, but you know what? I think I'm pretty comfortable that it's always going to be the next cell down. And after all, I'm already on relative references, so I'll just select the next one down, copy, back to my data sheet, paste, or select the next cell, paste, and I'm done, right? I'm done recording, right? No, what am I missing? Yeah, I got to end up where I want the active cell to end up after I'm done recording. And again, still on relative references. And you'll see now, I mean, every one I've done so far has been, offset. Oh, this one offsetted the row instead of the column. But now we got to go backwards 2 and down 1. So there it is. Offset 1 row down, backwards 2 columns, and select it. Now I'm done. Stop recording. Okay, so now I've got my code kind of in 2 segments here. So here's where my other one ends, where it ends end sub, like there's where my stock data one ends. And then my other code begins here. Ends this macro, starts this macro. You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to say, don't end that one, don't start the next one. And that's going to put them all together. So now it starts at the top, and it's just going to run all the way through to the end sub at the bottom. Oh, that's glorious. That should do it. I should be able to come over here now. Southwest Airlines, Control Shift S. You can do it. Control Shift S. That's wonderful. And in fact, if I only had these 9 tickers to do every day, I might just be done. I might hit Control Shift S 9 times and call it good. But what if I had 900? What's the problem if I have 900? My pinky is going to get sore from pressing Control Shift S. So what I really want this to do is I want it to start at the top. I don't want it to go all the way till I run out of stock tickers. Should we do it? Let's do it. Unfortunately, there's no way to, well, I say there's no way to record it. Can I think of a way to record this? Maybe, but it would be really ugly. But this is really common. What we've done so far is we said, listen, I don't know how to write all this code to run a web query and this. So I recorded myself doing it. Like if there's something I know how to do in Excel, great. Record yourself doing it. You'll see the code to do it. This next part, there's no way to record. So what I want to do is I want to tell it, hey, let's modify this that got recorded. We've already done some modification on it, not a whole lot. But let's modify this so that it happens over and over again. In fact, this one's useful just by itself. Like maybe I don't want to get them all. Maybe I just want to get one on my list. This one does that. I'm going to leave this one just the way it is. It's perfect. But let's go ahead and make another sub procedure. So I'll start this one from scratch, sub, get all data. I hit enter and it goes, oh, you'll need this opening and closing parentheses here. I'll tell you about those later. You'll need the end sub. It put all that in for me. That was nice. And now what I'd like to do is I would like to tell it to just, I'll start off by making this do the same thing that stock data does. So I can just come here and say, call stock data. Now, these two sub-procedures do exactly the same thing. In fact, one just invokes the functionality of the other. And so what happens is when I run this one, it says, oh, here's the first statement, call stock data, okay. And it comes down here and it goes bing, 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 goes through all of this. When it gets to the end sub down here at the bottom, it goes, oh, I'm done with that. It comes right back up here and says, all right, I'm done with that, what's next? And it goes, oh, nothing, I'm done. So they really would do exactly the same thing. But what I'd like to do is I want to tell it, hey, let's tell it, no, don't just run stock data. We're going to this is getting it all. So I want to tell it to start off probably by making sure that I've got the right sheet selected. Stock data doesn't make sense to run stock data unless I'm on the sheet. But this one, let's start off by making sure I got the right sheet selected. So how do I say, make sure that you've selected the data sheet? I think it actually did that for me down here somewhere. Wasn't there? Ah, here it is. Sheet data select. I'm going to copy that line. So before I call stock data, let's select the right sheet. And then which cell should I select before I start running stock data over and over again? Probably A2. That's the first one that's got ticker in it. So I'm going to say, all right, this one, we a little bit different. Instead of starting on the active cell, we're always going to select the data sheet. We're always going to go to A2. And now we want to call stock data over and over and over. In programming lingo, that's called a loop. And we've got like a whole day talking about loops. So I'm not giving you all the details about the loop today. It's just enough to kind of see how this works. Here's how we do it. I put in the keyword do. Do does nothing except saying this is the beginning of a loop. It doesn't accomplish anything. It just says sometime in the future, you're going to want to come back to the beginning, and here it is. This is the beginning of the loop. I can then have any number of statements here. Let me just put another one in so you can see it here. Did we see how to write in something to the immediate window? I think we did. That's why I moved the immediate window up here. So let me just go ahead and write the timeout, debug.print. Debug.print now. That will print the current date and time up here in the immediate window. I'm just doing that so you can really see you can have any number of statements inside the loop. And once you're done with whatever statements you want to run in that loop that you want to have happen over and over again, you're going to say, go back to the top of the loop. And the way you do that is loop. This is called the do loop. Boy, they were thinking when they came up with that name. This is the do loop. So do just says beginning of the loop. You have any number of statements that you want, and then loop says go back to the do. Go ahead. Oh, good question. The question is, he's already thought how this works. Do, beginning of a loop. It says, great, do this. That's going to print something to the immediate window. Call stock data. Can come down here, bing, 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 bing. It's going to get up here, keep going, loop. It's going to go to the top. It says do. What does it do? It prints out that. It calls stock data. Bing, 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 bing. It's going to come back up here when it's done. It's going to hit loop and go to the top. Print that out. Stock data. Bing, 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 bing. How do you stop? How long will this loop run? It's not going to run forever. I mean, it will not run forever. It would take something weird for it to happen. Like there's got to be like a power failure. It would stop with a power failure. It would stop if someone, like if the network got interrupted, because when it tries to make the call to the web server, that would cause it to stop. Second coming would probably cause it to stop. Nuclear holocaust would do it. In this case, it moves down a row each time. So even if none of those other things happened, what's it eventually going to do? After 1.02 million iterations, what's it going to do? It's going to try to go past the bottom of the sheet, and that would cause it to stop. I don't want to wait for 1.02 million iterations. I got to give it some way to get out. Here's how you say get out. And someone said it in the back. I'm going to do until. By the way, this is legal syntax. This really would execute, and it would just keep on going until some error happened. But I'm going to say do until UN T-I-L, until something is true. I'm going to put some expression here that's true. Do until 5 is greater than, if 5 is greater than 2. That's always true. It would stop this loop before it ever ran it. So I need something that's conditional, that only is true when I'm really done. And here's what it is. Until my active cell, the active cell's value is equal to, and let me just put, I'm done. I'm done. In which case, I don't want to double quote there. In which case, I'm done. I would need to come over here and put at the bottom of my list, put in there, I'm done. And now each time it starts, it's going to start right here, and it's going to evaluate that condition. Does active cell value equal I'm done? No. What does active cell value equal? MSFT. So this is false. And so it's going to keep doing, because it's going to do this until it's true. It would move down, move down, move down. Eventually, it would get to here. It would try to run this until active cell.value equals I'm done. And it would be like, oh yeah, I guess we're done. That would be true, and it would let us out. It's kind of a weird thing to have to write at the bottom. Maybe I'll just put done. That would be simpler. Only problem with done is it might be a valid ticker symbol. I might end up with done somewhere in the middle. So maybe I'll just 1. I don't know. Or blank. Why don't I just do for its blank? So here, like this would be what's looking for I'm done. Here's what's looking for done. That's what's looking for no value. So it's like quote, quote, a really weird thing to say, quote, quote. What is that? That's a string literal with what in it? Nothing. And that's what an empty cell is. That's the value of an empty cell. So now I'm going to do this with a little less. I want all those. Let me put a break in here by just inserting a row. So now it's going to start here, and it's going to go down until it hits a blank row. But I don't want to wait for it to do all of these. So I think I'm in good shape. This is here. I'm going to be on my ticker sheet. Now, how am I going to run this? Well, I could come over here and choose, here's all my macros, go find the one called get all data and run it. But I don't really want my user to have to do that. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring on a button and put it right on the sheet. Or hey, should we put a button in the ribbon? Should we put a button in the ribbon to run it? Yeah, we're going to do that, but it's towards the end of the semester. There's a lot of road to get under our feet to make that work. It's kind of hard to do. For now, we're just going to put a button on the sheet. So on my developer tab, I've got this controls group here, and it's got this insert dropdown. I'm going to choose the very first thing. Under the form controls, there's a button, that little first button right there. That's what I'm after. So on my developer tab, over here, this little insert dropdown looks like a little toolbox with a wrench and screwdriver by it. And I'll choose that first tool, and then I'll just click and drag to drop. Did I click it? Click that tool, and then I'll click and drag to draw that button on. And it immediately says, hey, you're making a button. I bet you want to run a macro. 2, right? You are. Which one do I want? Get all data. And there's the button with the little handles around it. I could change the size, move it around, and I can change that label to say, get data. I'll click off of it. Now I'll click back on it, and that should run it. So I've got now, should be expecting to see Microsoft, Oracle, and Google when it's done running. You can see it's working on Microsoft now. Doesn't do a very good job updating the screen while it's coming along. And the reason is it used to like totally flash the screen back and forth. But as it turns out, like one of the most expensive things we do computationally is like changing the screen. You got to redraw all those pixels. Like if you're going to think, you know what, I got a whole bunch of money to spend on a computer. Like what's the most powerful computer you could buy these days? Like personal laptop computer. What is it designed to do? The most expensive laptop computer you could buy, what is it designed to do? Games. That's right. It's designed to do games. And that's because what makes a game experience really well? Really fast refresh rate. And so like it is expensive to be able to get lots and lots and lots of refresh over and over again. And so, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, maybe 8 years ago, they said, you know what, we're going to quit updating the screen. If you really want to update the screen along the way, you'll have to tell us to update the screen. It makes things run a little bit faster. But now it looks like it's brought this in. Oh no, how come the Microsoft PE ratio is 6th of February? When it got pasted in, like Excel looked at it. Oh, it looks like you're trying to put a date in. It was probably 6.02. No, 02 dot, probably 6.02. Anyway, that's just formatted that way. So if I change that to text, oh, it wasn't 6.02, it was 37.66. Why it saw that, I don't know. Anyway, that's what the real value is. Oh, I could have made it a number. That's why I should have done made it just general. Home, general. Questions? We have like 15 minutes, right? What have I forgotten to teach you? I've never done this lecture in that short amount of time. Have I forgotten something important? I don't think so. I think I was just smoother today than I've ever been before. Let me tell you one more story. There's kind of a little warning here. Maybe I told you this already. I don't know. Had a student come to me just a couple years ago. He wasn't even a former student, just a student. Tracked me down in my office, Professor Allen, I hear you're the guy with VBA. I said, well, I don't mean to brag, but yes. And he said, this is some trouble I need to do. And I said, well, didn't you take my VBA class? You know something? I mean, this is like basic stuff. You should know how to do this. No, I just had IS 201. And I suspected that he actually went first to his IS 201 professor. And his IS 201 professor was like, even though I'm sure he could have done it, was like, oh, you know what? Professor Allen's the guy on this. So he'd just taken a job, an internship, working somewhere over for BYU at the ASB. Did I tell you this story? Does this sound familiar? Working for the ASB. And they were making some kind of conversion in a system where they had to change, like all of their file structures had to move. We got all this, got a potload of files that are in this file structure, and we got to move it into this other file structure. And it was like, you know, just gotta have to, it was deterministic. You could tell what it was, but it was like a lot of work, you know, find that file, drag it over here, find that file, drag it over here. Couldn't we do that with VBA? And I said, yes, but why would I help you? I said that in my mind to him. I didn't say it out loud. But I was thinking, why would I help this student who's never even taken my class? At the time, I was trying to get volunteers to help set up for the Colonial Heritage Festival. It was like a month away. I said, okay, I'll help you, but I need you to help me. Come help us set up some tents and benches and such, you know, on this day in late June. He said, great. We had a little quid pro quo going on. We spent about 3 hours, wrote the system to do just what he wanted it to do. He went, and then I never heard from him. Well, I heard from him again when he came to help set up, you know, months later. So, hey, how did it go? Did you? I said, well, it worked perfectly. So the next Monday I went to the office. I ran it. It took about, he said it took about a couple of hours to run. I mean, it was like moving files and it took a long time to run. But then it finished. And so I went and said, okay, I'm done. What's next? And they said, what do you mean you're done? I'm done. Like, you asked me to do it and now it's done. And what did they say? That was your internship. That's it. There's no next. You're fired. And I said, you're kidding me. They fired you? Yes. Well, thanks for coming to help us set up anyway. And I am still, anytime I tell that story, I'm still just aghast that they would do that. Like, if nothing else, have them do something else for you. But you're fired, really? We did this way fast, like dramatically faster and better than you could have possibly hoped I would do it. I'm fired. So for him, it would have been better if, you know, we wrote it to just do a little bit at a time. He'd come to work, press the button once, go for a while, and he could watch Netflix in his office or something. And then press the button again. And anyway, the point is, I don't know. That's the only time I've ever heard of that happening, but you know, use your judgment as to whether you want to actually let people know you figured out how to do this really, really fast. The one last thing I'd like to do with this, and we won't be able to do it today because it takes us, we'll need to learn a lot more, is that how long is this going to take to do 900 tickers? How long did it take to do that 3? Probably took about half a minute. That's for 900, so like 400 minutes. Anyone know what 400 minutes is? It's a long time, about 6 hours. You're good at that. So I don't want to just have to sit here and watch till it's done, because when that starts running, what am I going to do? I'm going to get a ham sandwich, right? And what I would really like Excel to do is send me a text message when it's done saying, hey, I'm done. You know, it's time to get busy again so I can come back and go back to work. Can we make Excel send us a text message? Yeah. Will we do that in this class? Yes. Not today, but we will do it in this class. All right, folks, that's it for today. Thanks for coming. I will see you next week. Class dismissed. Oh, you're too kind. You're too kind. What's that? They. I forgot who they. Oh, the hiring. Oh, good. Thanks for letting me know.
You are a little bit taller. I never actually confronted VBA.
Yeah, it's crazy powerful just because you can take all of Excel's functionality.
And everyone, no, not everyone knows how to automate.
That's one of the great things is that anywhere you go, because Excel is everywhere. Anywhere you go, you know what? I've got a compiler. I can do something.
Just a quick logistical question.
So let me stop recording so you don't catch your logistical question and immortalize it.